Hello, chess friends, and welcome to Jozarov's chess channel, and welcome to the Computer Chess Championship Season 11 finals. So, more than 80 rounds were played so far between the two top engines, Leela C Zero and Stockfish. Today I wanted to show you a great game. I think it was really an attractive game to see. It's a game played by Stockfish with the white pieces against Leela C Zero. It's in this Mexican defense. The Mexican defense is really a tricky opening. It is sort of a provocative opening which forces white to sort of play this clarification in the center. I'll of course show you what's all about, what are the ideas of blacks in these types of variations. And the funny thing is that Leela C Zero also won the game in this particular opening against Stockfish. So Stockfish had to make something out of this game, because Stockfish before this round was 2 points behind Leela C Zero, so not so many rounds to play. So Stockfish has to win this game in order to keep the chances and win this very nice season. So let's see the game. We have d4 by Stockfish, knight to f6, c4, and now knight to c6. This is now the tricky opening, the Mexican defense. This is provocative because black is forcing white to do this d5 move. In the continuation, Stockfish played knight to c3. Now we have e5, already the challenging white center, because white has of course a very powerful center and a very nice flexibility in the game. d5. After knight to e7, this is now black's idea to go into this, well, sort of King's Indian setup with knight to g6, maybe after d6, knight to e7, and then f5, creating a very nice pawn breakthrough on the king side. After white has castled on the king side, black would have a really dangerous attack here in this types of positions. So here knight to f3 was played by Stockfish. d6 doesn't bring you so much, I think, because you can simply play knight to g6 after d takes c7, queen takes, and now we have a very interesting position. I think it's similar to the knight of defense. In black can try maybe something a6, d6, creating sort of a Boleslavsky hole situation. I've explained this Boleslavsky hole in one of my strategy videos. So the idea behind this move is to create a very powerful bishop here on e6, maybe attacking the c4 weakness, but you continue the game with the d5 weakness, with also maybe a d6 pawn weakness. But this is still playable, I think, for black, because as I said, we have already developed here our two knights, and it's perfectly fine here to continue in the game. After knight to f3, here knight to g6 was played by Leela C Zero. And whenever I see, when I play chess, whenever I see that the knight is placed on g6 or on b6, I always try to do this flank attack, attacking here the knight with the potential h5 move, then h6, kicking away and grabbing some space, which is more important. In the game, h5 was played by Leela C Zero, trying to create, of course, a blocking system. And now there is a problem about the position also for white and also for black, because in the continuation you'll see that white and black will castle on the king side, but you have always this advanced pawn, so you're leaving also some spaces behind. You have weakened further your pawn structure in front of the king. What the good thing about the position of blacks here is that at least you have two defensive pieces. You have two knights in front of the king. You have a good defensive setup. In the game, bishop to g5 was played by Stockfish, trying the e4 move. The e4 move is very important here to really dominate in the center, and knight to f4 can always be met with g3, so at least you haven't moved the g pawn so far, so the knight outpost on f4 wouldn't be such a dangerous idea here for black. Here bishop to e7 was played, and now g3. Anyway, we have d6 and now e4. Very, very interesting line, I think, played by these two top engines. Now you can still proceed with the fianchetto, bishop to g2, and even castle king side here. Black can also castle here on the king side, which is very interesting, although the pawn structure has, as I said, been weakened so far, but still you have many pieces in front of your king. Also white has the bishop, has the knight, has the queen. After that the rook will be on f1, so still many possibilities. If we evaluate the position from the piece activity, I still think that white has a better activity, still maybe with some possibilities even to create a flank attack. The common flank attack would be for c5, but the bishop is a very good defensive piece. It covers also the c5. Basically, what we love to do is maybe get even rid of this bishop, because this dark square bishop of blacks, it's a little bit blocked out by its own pawns. This bishop on g5, on the other hand, has a good activity, so one of the strategical trades of pieces can be to get rid of the dark square bishops, because then the light square bishop of whites would be blocked out by its own pawns, and then you would have a perfect diagonal here for your own light square bishop. So that's why after knight to g4, you see Stockfish doesn't go into the trades of pieces, because as I said, you just simply give up your good piece for a bad piece. So that's why bishop to d2. Very interesting, but I hope you realize, if you understand the position and the pawn structure in the center, you know when to trade pieces, when not to trade pieces. Now bishop to d2 stays on this very active diagonal, and still black is continuing the game with a very bad piece. I think this bishop on e7, it's a good defensive piece, but it's not an active attacking piece. So in the game f5, very true aggressive move here by Leela C Zero, and very brave, I think, because still you need to castle on the king side and you're weakening your pawn structure further. That's why e takes f5, played by Stockfish. Bishop takes f5, now bishop to g2, and now castling. Although we have this advanced h5 pawn still, as I said, again I'm repeating, but here it's, I hope you realize, a very fixed position on the king side, because the knight on g4 creates this blocking system, so nothing can happen so far. The main idea now of blacks is to somehow maybe advance this e4 pawn. So the e4 move is the main strategical idea, but it's not so easy to play it immediately, because you get knight to d4. Let's see the potential line after e4. Then you get knight to d4, attacking the bishop. If you try e3, it's not so good. If you retreat with the bishop, then you lose simply the pawn. So although this is our main plan here for black, but it's not possible so far. Black would love to play this move after something like e3. It's not a problem, we can simply trade off. And here after bishop to g4, queen to c2, attacking the knight, you have to, of course, somehow maybe play knight to e5, but now we can simply castle, and I think we have a secured king's position. We have still the possibility to play a knight to f5, bishop to e4, bishop to g6, and similar ideas. So this is, I think, game over for black. So far this e4 doesn't work. That's why Leela C Zero castled here, queen to e2. Queen to d7, and now castling also by Stockfish. Rook from a to e8. You see, Leela C Zero has connected rooks, goes with this rook on this very annoying file, I think, because there are maybe some discovered attack possibilities by the rook on the queen. So if the position clears on the e file, the queen could be endangered. In the game, rook from a to e1 was played, and now a6, which is a preparation to maybe go c6 and then b5. Maybe creating sort of a minority attack on the queen side, trying somehow to break the position, because this pawn is very annoying on d5. It creates this very important space advantage on the other side of the board. It's creating us very nice domination in the center of the board. If you try e4 now, instead of this a6, I think we can simply take knight takes e4, bishop d8, and now we can go queen to d3. If you play knight to e5 attacking the queen, it's not again a problem. I think we can go simply queen to c3 or similar ideas, because the bishop can take, of course, the knight on f3, or we can even immediately take the knight on e4. So if you try here rook takes e4, then of course we first take, and if you try the pinning idea, then knight to g5 is perfectly fine. I think it defends everything. Here you can also take with the knight to d3, and simply go into favorable middle game, because we are a pawn up, and pawn up is of course a good situation. If we go into a favorable endgame with one pawn up, I think white is simply winning. So again, e4 not possible so far. So in the game, after rook from a to e1, as said, a6 was played, and now b3, fixing the position on the queen side, and also maybe have use of this diagonal, maybe with some bishop to b2 ideas, and covering this very important diagonal. In the game, bishop to d8 was played. You see how now Leela C Zero tries this very annoying attack. That's why knight to g5, preventing again this e4. Again, I'm pointing out this is the main idea of blacks here, to get this pawn breakthrough. If that happens, I think black has a favorable game. So here in the game, knight to g5. Finally, Leela C Zero gets rid of the bishop, and the funny thing is that it's not the best way to take out with the bishop, because when we're playing with the bishop pair, you don't want to have static positions. Now after bishop to g4, there is a certain staticity in the game. There is really the fixed position. Here Stockfish plays a brutal move, h takes g5, and now we have a new position in which we have again created some dynamics. This pawn is very annoying, restricts also a very important square for the knight, knight to f6, because we would love to play knight to f6 as I said, and then again this e4 move, followed by, if you could just imagine, knight to f6, e4, knight to e5, and then maybe knight to f3 would be very dangerous here for white. So that's why very cool move, h takes g5 here by Stockfish, not allowing knight to f6. And the more important thing is that we can now play f4 if the position allows, of course. We have to first get our queen out of this very annoying e file, but f4 is sort of an element, I think, which white can use in order to connect now the three pawns and create also a very important pawn breakthrough with some majority attack possibilities with this 3-on-2 situation on the king side. So in the game, e4 played anyway by Leela C Zero, but it's a mistake, I think. Maybe h4 here is a good line, trying to crack the position a different way. But again, knight to e4, you see, you can create this blockade against this potential e4 move anyway. If h3, it's again not a problem. We have maybe some discovered attack possibilities, but now you see we can simply takes, and now we can play queen to g4, pinning the knight and still continuing the game with a very important blockade. So the problem is, although the bishop is blocked out by our own pawn, we can use, I think, this diagonal to play bishop to c3 and then have this very nice diagonal aiming on the g7 pawn. So this bishop is still good, the bishop on d2. So that's why, again, I don't think this is a favorable continuation here for black. This is, I think, a good line for white. So in the game e4, as I said, anyway, Leela is desperately trying to get this plan through, but it's a mistake, because here Stockfish simply took bishop takes e4. We have bishop takes, knight takes e4, and now queen to f5 attacking the knight, but now f3 fixing now finally the knight, and the knight is now very well placed, centralized, which is the most important thing. Again, I'm pointing out you cannot play knight to f6. This is why this h takes g5 idea was very strong by Stockfish. And as I said, this is now a centralized knight. It's supported by the pawn. We have still a good activity with our bishop, with some potential bishop to c3 moves. So this is, I think, a better continuation again for white. So knight on e5 was played, and now f4, again knight to g4, and now queen to d3. There are now some discovered attack possibilities, very tricky. Knight to f6. If you try something like knight to e7, here rook to e2 was played by Leela C Zero. But if you try here h4 anyway to somehow create some weaknesses here on the king side, then knight to f6 is very dangerous. If you take, then you get here rook takes e8, and it's game over. Of course, you cannot take with the knight to an f6, because here you lose the queen. So great tactics that Stockfish has prepared you. So that's why knight to d7 had to be played, and now rook on e2, very important to double up rooks here on the e file, also supporting a very powerful knight, and again maybe try this discover attack possibility. So in the game knight to e5, we have queen to c3. If you play queen to c2, it's not so good, because you see the importance of the queen. The queen has to cover this g3 pawn. A very important move here now by Stockfish, realizing this potential threats of blacks. Queen to c3, we have queen to g4. You see now the queen sneaks a little bit in white's camp here, trying really this annoying checks, and now the h4 is a serious threat that white has to handle. And now rook from e to e1, again connecting the rooks on the first rank, and now knight to d7. Here you have to, of course, go somewhere with the knight. You don't have any better squares. In the game, knight to f2, kicking away the queen, and you see now the importance of the queen, that it's on c3, because now the queen cannot take, and we are simply kicking away this very annoying queen. We don't want the queen to stay here on this very active square on g4. So queen to f5, we have queen to f3, and now you see how Stockfish has regrouped. We're a pawn up. We want to keep the compact position now here, even with some possibilities to maybe crack the position g4, queen takes g4, and simply simplify the position, going into favorable endgame with one pawn up. It's not so complicated. It is a normal strategical element, I think, in chess to go into a favorable endgame, not complicate things too much. And the main thing also, the problem here is that the pawn is hanging on h5, so you have to do something. If you try g6 here to support the h5 pawn, then it gets, I think, very risky here for black, because you have bishop to c3. You have uncovered here this very important diagonal for the light square bishop, and now dark square bishop, pardon me, and now there are these problems on dark squares. If we regroup, maybe queen to e3, queen to d4, we have even some dangerous checkmate threats on dark squares here. So that's why after queen to f3, queen to f7, you see how Stockfish forces Leela C Zero to retreat, to go back. Very cool move, very active play by Stockfish. Here knight to e4, again centralizing the knight, and now knight to f5, creating sort of a blocking system, and now queen to d3. So again, we have a similar position, but now it's different. Now the queen is not so active anymore. The knight is, of course, creating a blocking system, but it's a little bit passive. It is a little bit stuck to the defense of this potential f5 move by white. Here rook to e7, and now rook to e2 again, rook to e8, and now again both of black and white are creating this batteries on the e file, because there's the only open file here, and you have to compete, of course, if you want to win this game. So in the game, b5 was played. Here a tricky move by Leela C Zero. The main idea is to grab this pawn. This pawn, as I said, is our main space advantage, so we are trying here to deflect the pawn from the defense of this d5 pawn. But here Stockfish simply continues to play actively. Bishop to f5. Here after b takes c4, we have b takes c4, and now knight to f8, again forcing Leela C Zero to do a passive move, and now bishop to c3, placing the bishop on the best square. Here king to h8 was played, and now king to h2. You can also play king to g2, but probably in some tactical possibilities there are, if you just could imagine this knight, if it weren't here on e4, there are maybe some discovered attack possibilities. Again, with knight to h4, you have to take here, and then maybe the queen can go and take this pawn on f4. But this is really speaking in long terms. Here I think king to h2 is better because of this discovered attack possibilities. No checks by the knight at least are possible. King to h2, knight to g6, now finally preparing this h4 move. This h4 really would break the position here in white's position, and that's why queen to f3. If h4, then we have at least this queen on h5 move, very annoying check, and on the king, so that's why the king has to retreat. And again, maybe we have this discovered attack possibilities with knight to f6. So tricky stuff here, prepared also by Stockfish. In the game, h4 anyway, played by Leela C Zero, and now g4. Now we have three pawns that are connected, that can really start to roll, and with the support of this bishop, it's very dangerous for black, because after something like f5, f6, this bishop will be the best minor piece on the board. So in the game, knight to g3 was played. We have f5. Here Stockfish sacrifices the rook, but the problem is, if you take here the knight on g3, then we have h takes g3, you have to react. That's the problem. After king to g3, we have simply trade off the rooks on the e file. After queen to e2, we have queen to f4. The queen comes very actively into the game, and this is now an equalized position. The evaluation is simply 0.0. Here it's an equal game. You can create some perpetual check possibilities for both sides. So that's why Stockfish didn't go into this line, played this very aggressive and very cool move, I think, f5, sacrificing the rook. Great positional sacrifice here again by Stockfish. Knight takes e2, rook takes e2, but now look at these pawns. These pawns are rolling. This bishop is dangerous. The queen is centralized, has some possibilities to maybe sneak in through h5, and also this knight on e4 is very well placed, very centralized. So that's why here it's a great sacrifice by Stockfish. Here, if you try knight to, in the game a5 was played, but if you try knight to e5, then bishop to e5 is very tricky. Here, if you try d takes e5, then we have a very annoying move here for black. It's basically game over. g6, you have to retreat with the queen to f8, but now g5 with the preparations to play queen to h5, and again it would be game over. You have to give up more material. It's even a forced checkmate sequence in 10 moves. So in this particular moment, if you take with the rook on e5 to try creating sort of a blocking system, again the same idea. g6, queen to f6 is of course not possible. Again, queen to f8, and now again we can try this g5 move and queen to h5. So really risky thing that can happen here to Leela C Zero after rook to e2. As said, a5 was played, and now bishop to d4, getting the bishop more centralized. Here, king to g8. Leela C Zero sees the problems in the position and tries to get out of this potential queen to h5 move of this very dangerous attack. Of course, you cannot take after g6 because your queen is hanging. King to h3, very important move, hiding with our king a little bit behind this pawn, securing the king, because we don't want to have this king on the same rank like the rook, because if the position clears again, then there are maybe some check possibilities of blacks. So that's why king on h3, king on h8, and now rook to e1, we have a4, and again bishop to c3, rook to f8, and now f6, finally cracking the position. Here liberating the diagonal for the dark spot bishop. Here king to h7 was played, and now queen to d1. We have rook on d7, and now king rook to f1. Now there are maybe some discovered attack possibilities. Still, you have to somehow secure, maybe with knight to d2. Then we can really take here this f takes g7 idea. So this would be the main threat here. That's why queen to e8, getting out of this annoying f file, and now queen to d4. A very tricky move here by Stockfish, with the preparation in some occasions, if the position allows it, to maybe create a pawn breakthrough with f7, and then maybe creating some checkmate threats on g7. Here queen to b8 was played. If you try again to close the position with knight to e5, then queen to f2 is very dangerous. You would be forced basically to retreat again to g6, because this h4 weakness is still present. If we sneak in with our queen on the h file, then the black's king is really endangered. So that's why queen to b8, not even bothering about this placement of the knight here on d5 on e5. In the game, queen to d3, again with the preparation to create maybe some discovered attacks, because when you play with the bishop and the queen, you want to place the queen on the opposite colored squares than your bishop. So it means you see how this bishop and the queen are simply aiming against black's king. In the game, queen to c8 was played, and now rook to f5, simply improving the position of the pieces. Because if we evaluate the position of your pieces, always you try to find the best square. So the bishop is on an active square, so it doesn't need improvement. The queen is also on an active square, it doesn't need improvement. The knight on e4 is also on a very active square, so it doesn't need improvement. So the only piece that needs improvement is the rook. And now Stockfish uses this element of this most activity of this best active square of the board, and that's why here rook to f5, very important move. Now the rook is really on the best square on the board, and now maybe we have again some tactical possibilities. Now rook from d to f7 was played, queen to f3. You see how Stockfish sneaks in black's position. King to g8 was played, and now c5. We have d takes c5, knight takes c5, and now we have a new square for a knight. We are getting a new active square. It's the square e6, and this is simply winning position here for black, because black is for white. Pardon me. Black is so paralyzed with his rooks, with his knight, with the queen is too passive. Although you're up the exchange, but this is a great positional game and attacking game by Stockfish. Rook to e8. We have now finally. F takes g7. Of course, you don't want to give up now the rook, because the pawn is covered by the bishop on c3. That's why rook to e7, trying at least somehow to compete here. If we try rook to f5 here, then we get g takes f5. You see the pawns are rolling again. If you try something like knight to e7, then knight to e6 is very dangerous. And now look at these three pawns. We have closed the important diagonal. Now f6, f7 is the serious threat, and I think this is game over really for black. So in the game, after f takes g7, we have rook to e7 as said, and now knight to e4 with the preparation to play knight to f6, forcing finally black to take somehow this pawn here. This is the main idea, to liberate really even more this dark square bishop. In the game, queen to b7 was played, and now knight to f6. This is now the move. After king to g7, we have some discovered attack possibilities, but it's not so dangerous because you don't have a good discovery attack. You're basically not attacking any piece. So if the queen would have been somewhere maybe here, I don't know, b6, then knight on d7 is a good tactical shot, because then you lose the queen, of course, from black's perspective. But now there are really no good discovers. That's why queen to d3, again with the same idea, to place the queen on a different diagonal, simply even further opening the position against black's king. Queen to c8 was played, rook to f3, queen to a8, and now bishop to d4, simply improving the position of the pieces. Queen to c8, we have bishop to c5, and now queen to d8. You cannot basically retreat with the rook on a good square. If you try something like rook to e1, then again I think we have this queen to f5 idea with some discovered attack possibilities. Maybe knight to h5 is also a possibility. That's why here Leela C Zero didn't care for this rook here. After queen to d8, we have knight to h5 first, king to h7, and now rook to f6. Very, very cool move, again improving the position of the rook. Now the rook is even on a better square. You see the repositions here of Stockfish. Here rook takes f6, we have knight takes on f6, but this is now a very cool line that Stockfish has prepared here, because here we're going into a forcing line in which black has to trade off even more pieces. King to g7, we have knight to h5 again, king to h7, bishop takes e7, queen takes e7, and now knight to f4. Very nice move, forcing now really black to trade off even more pieces. The queen has to participate in the defense of this knight. Queen takes g6, queen takes, knight takes, king takes g6, and now king to h4. And this is game over, because this is now favorable endgame for white, because we are simply 2 pawns up. But the more important thing is that we have a pass pawn here. You can try something like a3, like Stockfish, like Leela C Zero played in the game. But now king on g3, king on h7, and now simply we have a pass pawn. We can go after this pawn. So this is really a theoretical win here for white. Okay, great game by Stockfish. Great first positional game, then attacking game with this positional sacrifice, giving up the rook for the knight. Very cool attack, getting these pawns rolling. Then after that we have this element of improving the pieces, and then going into a favorable endgame with simply one pass pawn. And this is really, I think, an instructive game, and very nice game played by this very nice engine Stockfish. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this game. I enjoyed it a lot. It had really some great elements of the common chess game. Meanwhile, you can watch my other common chess games played by computers, and you can also watch my best chess games of all time if you want to see humans battling in their best chess games in history. And you can also subscribe to my channel if you like this content. Thanks you for watching, guys, and chess is the best, of course.